Shaquille O'Neal was sitting in a McDonald's on Sunset Boulevard, enjoying a quiet moment away from the spotlight when a little boy, around 5 years old, nervously approached him. The boy was clutching a broken toy car and whispered something softly into Shaq's ear. Immediately, Shaq's expression changed. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and called 911. What happened next was a story of courage, kindness, and hope that will warm your heart. Before we dive into this emotional story, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tomorrow we'll bring you another inspiring tale you won't want to miss. The soft golden sunlight stretched across Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, making the afternoon peaceful in the middle of the usual busy city. Shaquille O'Neal, the famous basketball star who once ruled the courts, had just finished a charity event, spending time with underprivileged kids, giving out gifts and sharing laughter. Even with his towering size, Shaq's kind heart made him a hero to many kids, especially those who had never imagined meeting someone so special. After a long day, instead of heading to a fancy restaurant or going home, Shaq decided to do something rare: enjoy a simple meal at McDonald's. Driving his familiar SUV, he cruised down Sunset Boulevard and spotted the familiar golden arches. Chuckling to himself, he thought, "It's been ages since I had a Big Mac." He entered the restaurant, ducking slightly to avoid hitting the low doorway. Inside, the sounds of everyday life filled the air: kids laughing in the play area, orders being called from the counter, and the delicious smell of fries and burgers. Though everyone instantly noticed him, no one said anything. It was clear they all recognized him, the giant but always smiling basketball legend. Instead of being swarmed by fans, the restaurant continued its usual rhythm. Shaq stepped up to the counter, ordered a Big Mac, fries, and a soda, and chose a quiet corner table to sit. As he sat down, Shaq switched off his phone and let out a deep breath. This was one of those rare moments of peace, away from cameras and business calls. Each bite of his warm burger took him back to his younger days when life was simpler, when happiness came from little things like a meal after a long practice. He sat quietly, observing the people around him. Young families chatting cheerfully, kids playing in the play area. Shaq felt a warmth inside him. Even in the chaos of the world, there were still simple moments where happiness didn't need anything fancy. But then something unusual caught his attention. At a nearby table, a small boy was staring at him. The boy's bright eyes glimmered, though they showed a hint of worry. Clutched tightly in his hands was a small toy car with a broken wheel. Shaq smiled softly, thinking the boy was just starstruck, like many kids when they see him. He nodded slightly, offering a silent message: "It's okay, buddy, come over if you want." But the boy hesitated. There was something about his expression that seemed different. His posture wasn't carefree like most kids. Shaq's instincts kicked in. Maybe this quiet afternoon was about to take an unexpected turn. Shaq looked again at the boy. Those innocent eyes held something that puzzled him. It wasn't the typical curiosity of seeing a famous person. There was something else, an unspoken fear. The boy didn't move. He sat still at his table, his small hands gripping the toy car as though it was the only thing he had. Next to the boy was a man. Shaq heard the server calling him by name. Mike? That must be his name, Shaq guessed. Mike didn't look like a regular dad taking his kid out for a meal. He was dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit, his hair perfectly slicked back. But what caught Shaq's attention wasn't his polished appearance. It was Mike's eyes, cold and sharp, like a hawk watching its prey. Every time the boy moved slightly, Mike would shoot him a sharp glance, warning him not to do anything. Shaq leaned slightly, keeping his eyes on them. That uneasy feeling stirred within him. He'd met all kinds of people, good and bad, throughout his life, and his instincts were rarely wrong. Mike wasn't someone Shaq felt comfortable trusting. Still, he knew this was just a hunch. He couldn't jump in without knowing what was really happening. Then something surprising happened. The boy slowly slid off his chair, his tiny feet barely making a sound. He gripped the toy car tightly as if drawing strength from it. Mike immediately turned his eyes on the boy, his brow furrowing with irritation. But instead of moving toward Mike, the boy cautiously walked toward Shaq, his eyes fixed on the giant man. Shaq looked up, surprised. The boy was coming toward him. Adam, that's what the man called him, stopped in front of Shaq and looked up with bright, anxious eyes. Shaq offered a gentle smile, lowering himself slightly so their eyes could meet at the same level. He said nothing, waiting for the boy to speak. Adam clutched the toy car, his small hands trembling. Then, in a soft, barely audible voice, he whispered, "Mister, he's not my dad. I need your help to save my mom." Shaq's heart sank. He looked from Adam to the table where the boy had come from. Mike. Mike's sharp eyes immediately noticed Adam was missing. He stood up, his polished demeanor cracking slightly, revealing something darker beneath. He took long strides toward Shaq, his eyes full of menace. No one else seemed to notice the unfolding tension except Shaq, who had just realized this encounter was far from random. Sensing the danger, Adam immediately pressed closer to Shaq, clutching the toy car tightly like it was his shield. Shaq slowly rose to his full height, creating a strong barrier between the boy and Mike. He said nothing, his eyes locked onto Mike. "Sorry if the boy bothered you," Mike said, his voice smooth but forcing a polite smile that didn't hide his irritation. "He's a bit restless." Shaq returned a calm smile, but his eyes carried a warning. "It's fine. He just wanted to talk to me for a moment. That's all." Mike tilted his head slightly, still trying to keep his cool, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "He just wanted to show me his toy car," Shaq said, his tone friendly though firm. "Seems like it's his favorite, doesn't it?" Adam gave a faint nod, still clutching the toy but stayed close to Shaq. Mike's expression tightened, but he tried to keep control. "I appreciate your concern, but we really need to go," Mike said, his tone now sharper. Shaq calmly replied, "Wait a moment. He wants to talk to me about this toy car. We won't take long." Adam didn't speak, but edged closer, pressing himself against Shaq's side. Mike's patience was wearing thin and Shaq knew it. "I don't think he's causing any trouble," Shaq said, his voice calm but steady. "Sometimes kids just need a moment to talk to someone, right?" As he spoke, he slipped his hand discreetly under the table and quickly sent a short text to 911. "Suspicious situation. Child may be in danger. Immediate assistance needed." It took only seconds, but the action was quick and subtle. Mike leaned forward slightly, planting both hands firmly on the table, trying to reassert control. "You don't understand the situation," he said in a low voice. "Adam is my son. I know him better than anyone else, and I won't allow a stranger to interfere in family matters." Shaq remained seated, but his imposing frame seemed to tower over Mike. "If you're Adam's father, then you must know how important it is for kids to feel safe, right?" Shaq asked softly but firmly. Mike's eyes flashed with anger, betraying the calm he was trying to keep. He inhaled deeply, adjusting his cufflinks, his polished exterior slipping. "I appreciate your concern, but we really need to leave," he said, his voice growing sharper. Shaq stood up, his towering frame completely blocking Mike from Adam. "Wait a moment," he said calmly. "Adam wanted to talk to me about this toy. We won't take long." Mike paused, glaring at Shaq. For a brief moment, the polished demeanor was replaced by something darker beneath. He stepped back, but his eyes stayed locked on Shaq, filled with silent warning. "You don't know what you're getting into," Mike said quietly. Shaq remained calm, but his grip on the situation tightened. And that's when a waitress, who had been quietly observing the situation, approached with a glass of water. She looked at Shaq and then glanced at Mike, sensing the tension. "Everything okay, Mr. Shah?" she asked quietly. Shaq gave her a faint smile. "Thanks, everything's fine, but I think Adam needs a little time to relax." Mike tried again. "I really don't see why we need to drag this out," he said sharply. "I've made it clear we need to leave." But Shaq was unwavering. "Sometimes kids just need someone to listen, isn't that right, Adam?" he asked softly. Adam didn't respond, but pressed himself closer to Shaq's side. Mike's patience finally broke. "I appreciate your concern, but we need to go now," he said firmly. Shaq stood tall, his massive frame still blocking Mike. "You need to wait," Shaq said firmly. "Adam wants to talk to me about his toy. We won't take long." Mike's expression soured, his forced politeness gone. "I really don't think this is necessary," he said, his tone growing sharper. "Adam's just curious, and I need to take him back to the table so he doesn't cause more trouble." Shaq smiled, but this time his eyes carried a sharpness. "I don't think he's causing trouble," he said firmly. "Sometimes kids just need a moment to talk to someone, don't they, Adam?" Adam didn't respond, but his hands tightened on the toy car, clinging to it like it was his lifeline. Shaq gently placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, creating a barrier between him and Mike. Then, the waitress quietly returned with a small glass of water, sensing the tension in the air. "Everything okay, Mr. Shah?" she asked softly. Shaq smiled kindly but firmly. "Thanks, everything's fine, but I think Adam needs a little more time to relax." But Mike wasn't ready to back down. "We really need to leave now," he said firmly, his voice sharp. "I've made it clear." Shaq stood tall, blocking Mike from Adam. "Wait a moment. Adam wanted to talk to me about his toy. We won't take long." The restaurant seemed to grow quieter as the usual sounds faded into the background. Shaq and Mike locked eyes, one exuding calm protection, the other cold control. The boy clung to Shaq, and Shaq knew this wasn't over yet. He had to keep Adam safe. Shaq could feel the rising tension in the air. Mike, who was still trying to stay calm on the outside, was beginning to show signs of losing control. His cold, piercing gaze swept over Shaq, then stopped on Adam, sending a warning look. But Adam, though small and trembling, clung tightly to Shaq's arm, finding a rare moment of safety in such a suffocating situation. Shaq leaned down, speaking softly, just loud enough for Adam to hear. "Adam, can you tell me what's going on? I'm here to help you. It's going to be okay." Adam looked up at Shaq, his green eyes reflecting hesitation and fear. His small hand tightly gripped the broken toy car, as if it were the only thing keeping him steady. After a moment of silence, Adam whispered, his voice shaky but clear, "Uncle, my mom. He hurt her. I don't know what to do. He won't let me tell anyone." Shaq felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Each word Adam spoke cut deep into his mind. Adam's mother, Christine, was being hurt and confined by Mike. This wasn't just about an angry man and a timid child. Shaq gently squeezed Adam's small shoulder, offering reassurance. "You're brave, Adam. Your mom will be okay. I promise." Before Shaq could ask more questions, Mike moved forward. His large frame seemed smaller compared to Shaq's towering figure. His face was tight, and the fake smile had completely vanished. "I think this has gone too far," he said in a low, sharp voice filled with subtle threats. "Adam, come here now. I won't say it again." Adam jumped back, stepping further toward Shaq. He trembled but refused to move closer to Mike. Shaq immediately stood tall, his body acting as a wall between Adam and Mike. He didn't need to say anything. His sharp gaze sent a clear message: "You're not touching this boy." Mike narrowed his eyes, fury building within him, but he kept his composure. He took a step closer, his voice colder and sharper. "I don't think you understand the situation. This is family business. You have no right to interfere." Shaq raised an eyebrow, his eyes never leaving Mike. "Adam doesn't seem like he wants to go anywhere," he said calmly but with a warning. "And when a child is scared, I think everyone has the right to help." Mike sneered, but the smile on his face was full of danger. "You have no idea what you're getting into, Shaquille," he said in a low, dangerous tone, testing Shaq's patience. Shaq didn't blink. His posture was strong and unwavering like a mountain. "I may not know all the details," he replied, his voice deep but firm, "but I do know one thing. This child is scared of you. And when someone needs help, I don't stand by and watch." Adam, still clutching to Shaq's arm, spoke with a tremble that made the situation even more dire. "Uncle, my mom said she'd be okay, but she can't stand up. I'm so scared." Those words only made it clearer to Shaq that the boy and his mother were in serious danger. He didn't just see the suffering in Adam's eyes, but also recognized the control and danger Mike had over them. Mike, realizing that Shaq had learned too much, completely lost his patience. "Fine," he said, his voice now full of menace. "You want to play the hero? You want to keep him here? Fine. But I'll make sure you regret it." Shaq stared directly into Mike's eyes, unfazed. "If that's a threat, you'd better be careful who you're talking to," he said, his tone carrying an undeniable weight. The tension between them grew thicker. Just then, Shaq heard the distant sound of police sirens. He looked at Adam and quietly said, "You're safe now, Adam. Help is on the way." Mike turned, his eyes flashing with one last burst of aggression before retreating back to his desk. But Shaq knew this confrontation was far from over. The sound of police sirens echoed through the air, shattering the familiar rhythm of the McDonald's restaurant. Shaq glanced out the window and saw 2 patrol cars pulling up to the front, with red and blue lights swirling and reflecting on the glass walls. He placed a hand on Adam's shoulder, leaned down slightly and whispered, "Stay here, Adam. Everything's going to be okay." Mike, realizing the police had arrived, quickly shifted his demeanor. The cold smile vanished, replaced by a confident and calm expression as if he were welcoming uninvited guests. He straightened his suit jacket and stood tall, preparing to confront the situation he believed he could control. 2 police officers entered the restaurant, their eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto Shaq and Mike. One of the officers, Sergeant Ramirez, stepped forward and asked in a professional but firm tone, "We received a call about a suspicious situation involving a child. Is there someone here named Adam?" Before Shaq could answer, Mike interjected. He stepped forward and extended his hand as if to shake Ramirez's hand. "Good evening, officers. I'm Daniel Mike. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The boy Adam is my son and we're just having dinner. Nothing unusual here." Ramirez glanced at Mike, then turned his eyes to Shaq, his expression sharp with scrutiny. "Are you the one who called us?" he asked. Shaq nodded, his voice steady but firm. "Yes, I am. I think you should hear from the boy before jumping to conclusions." Mike chuckled, a dry, theatrical sound. "Oh, that's really not necessary. Adam's just a little shy, aren't you, son?" He turned to Adam, his voice seeming casual but with an undercurrent of menace in his eyes. Adam didn't respond. He clung to Shaq's side, his wide eyes filled with fear, his trembling lips unable to form words. Seeing this, Shaq knelt down, gently placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Adam, can you tell them what happened? No one can hurt you here." Adam looked up at Shaq, mustering all his courage, and gave a small nod. He turned to Ramirez, his voice quiet but clear. He's not my dad. My mom said he's her friend, but he hurts my mom. He locked her in the house." Ramirez and his partner immediately shifted their demeanor. Their faces hardened, and Ramirez turned his gaze to Mike, his eyes as sharp as blades. But Mike maintained his composure, shaking his head with a faint dismissive smile. "I have no idea what this kid is talking about. Kids, they have wild imaginations." Shaq rose to his full height, his presence filling the room. "Do you want to explain why the boy is so afraid of you?" he asked, his deep voice carrying an undertone of menace. Mike, feeling the pressure, raised his hands defensively. "Look, I've got nothing to hide. I'm just trying to get the boy home. If you need to check anything, go ahead. I just want this resolved quickly." At that moment, a server approached, holding a backpack. She pointed at Mike and said, "This backpack belongs to him." She placed it on the table. Ramirez took the backpack and opened it. His expression hardened as he looked inside. The bag contained personal documents belonging to Christine, a notebook detailing the mother and child's movements, and even a map marking a remote area. Officer Vega, standing next to Adam, knelt down and asked gently, "Adam, do you recognize this backpack?" Adam nodded. His voice was soft but firm. "He always carries it. My mom said it has bad stuff in it." Ramirez faced Mike, his gaze as sharp as a blade, but Mike maintained his composure. "Mr. Mike, we have enough grounds to suspect you. I need you to stay right here while we investigate further." Realizing the tide had turned against him, Mike took a deep breath. But his eyes glinted with a dangerous edge. "You're making a big mistake," he said in a low voice, razor sharp. "I have a lawyer. You'll regret this." Shaq said nothing. He took a step back, creating a safe distance between Mike and Adam. He knew this wasn't over. Mike was still out there, and justice had to be served. Outside the silent house, flashing lights from police cars illuminated the scene. Mike was escorted out of the patrol vehicle. Two officers, their faces stern, cuffed him after meticulously reviewing the evidence from his backpack and Adam's testimony. Once Mike was restrained, he struggled against the officers, yelling threats. "You'll pay for this. I didn't do anything wrong. That kid's lying. You don't understand any of this." Shaq stood beside Adam, his imposing frame like an unyielding wall between the boy and the man. Adam clung tightly to Shaq's hand, his fearful eyes gradually finding solace in the warmth of that protective grasp. Mike turned his venomous gaze toward Shaq. "Who do you think you are, huh? Some kind of hero? You have no right to interfere in this." His teeth clenched, and his twisted smile grew more grotesque under the pulsing lights. Shaq remained calm, his steady gaze unwavering. "I don't need to be a hero," he said, his voice low but resolute. "As long as I'm here, Adam will be safe. This boy deserves a better life, one without threats from someone like you." Mike struggled harder, but the officers held him firmly, preventing him from getting anywhere near Shaq or Adam. "I'll be back," Mike screamed, his voice hoarse with rage. "You don't know what you've done. I'll make you regret this." Shaq shrugged, his expression unshaken by the threats. He looked down at Adam, speaking softly. "Don't worry, Adam. You'll never have to face him again." Officer Ramirez emerged from the house, carrying Mike's backpack and a notebook. He handed them to Vega, who had been meticulously documenting the evidence and photographing the scene. Ramirez turned to Shaq and nodded, a silent expression of gratitude. "We have enough evidence. He doesn't stand a chance in court." Shaq simply nodded, his gaze fixed on Mike now being led into the patrol car. Mike continued yelling and threatening, but the man who once exuded confidence and control now looked like a desperate, hate-filled shadow of himself. As the police car drove away with Mike, the tension in the air seemed to dissipate. Shaq knelt down and gently placed a hand on Adam's shoulder. He looked deeply into Adam's eyes and said softly, "You're safe now, Adam. No one can hurt you or your mom anymore. Adam looked up at Shaq, his eyes filling with tears. You're staying with me, right? His voice was small but full of hope. Shaq smiled and nodded firmly. Of course I'll stay until everything is sorted out. Adam gave a small nod and for the first time, his lips curved into a faint smile, something Shaq hadn't seen since Adam first came to him at McDonald's. Even though the world outside still held dangers in that moment, Adam knew he wouldn't face them alone. A police officer, Officer Vega, walked over and extended a hand to Shaq. Thank you for your courage and quick action in calling us. Not everyone would step up to protect a child the way you did. Shaq shook the officer's hand, his large hand gently patting Adam's hair. I just did what had to be done, he replied in a steady, warm tone. This boy's been through enough. Now it's time he gets the help he needs. Another officer, Officer Ramirez, spoke next. We'll make sure Mike faces full prosecution. With Adam's testimony and the evidence, there's no way he'll escape a harsh sentence. Shaq nodded, feeling confident that justice would prevail. But his heart also clung to a bigger mission, making sure Adam and his mom found safety and a chance for a better life. The gentle morning sunlight streamed softly through the hospital window, casting a warm glow over everything. In a quiet moment, Christine slowly opened her eyes. The pain in her forehead reminded her of what had happened. The screams, the fall, and the terrible fear that no one could save her and Adam from Mike. Her eyes searched the room, and her gaze immediately landed on Adam sitting beside her. His small hand tightly clutched hers. Mom? Adam cried out, his voice full of relief and joy. Tears filled his eyes as he leaned down to hug her. Despite her weakness, Christine managed to smile and wrapped her arms around him. I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's okay now, she whispered. Adam looked up at her and nodded firmly. Yes, Mom? Uncle Shaq saved us. He's our hero? The name Shaq made Christine blink in surprise. Just then a tall figure appeared in the doorway, Shaquille O'Neal. His towering frame made the room feel smaller. In his hand he held Adam's old toy car, carefully repaired and shining with a fresh coat of paint. Good morning, Shaq said in his deep, warm voice as comforting as the sunlight. His eyes brightened when he saw Christine was awake, his relief clear. I guess you had a long nap. Christine looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. She realized this was the man who had saved her and Adam. Thank you, she choked out, her voice weak but filled with emotion. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened. You saved our lives. Shaq pulled up a chair beside the bed and placed the toy car in Adam's hands. No need to thank me, he said, his gaze kind as he looked between Christine and Adam. Adam was incredibly brave. He's the real hero because he asked for help. I just did what anyone should do. Adam stared at the toy car in his hands, his eyes lighting up. You fixed it for me? His voice was full of awe. Shaq smiled and tousled the boy's hair. It didn't take much, but I thought you deserved to have your favorite toy back. Clutching the toy car tightly, Adam smiled, a genuine smile for the first time since the ordeal began. Thank you, he said softly but with heartfelt gratitude. Christine looked at Shaq, her eyes full of appreciation. You didn't just save Adam, you saved me too. You gave us a second chance. No words can express how grateful I am. Shaq tilted his head, his gaze sincere. Christine, you and Adam have been through so much. I just hope from now on you both can live in peace. And if you ever need anything, I'm here. Christine nodded slightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew she had a long road to recovery, but Shaq's presence and Adam's courage had reignited a light in her life, one she thought had been extinguished. Outside the window, the Los Angeles sky was a vibrant blue, promising brighter days ahead. Adam sat in the chair next to the bed, fiddling with the toy car in his hands. Now and then he glanced at his mom with a look of peace. Shaq stood up and walked toward the door, but before leaving, he turned to Christine and Adam. You need to rest. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Adam ran over and hugged Shaq's leg tightly. Don't go far, okay? Shaq crouched down and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. I'll always be here when you need me. Take good care of your mom, all right? Adam nodded firmly. I promise. As Shaq left the room, he knew he hadn't just helped a family escape danger. He had given them a chance to start over. But he also knew there was still work to be done, like making sure Mike faced justice for what he did. Shaq was determined not to stop until everything was truly set right. Shaq stood outside the hospital hallway, quietly watching the door to Christine and Adam's room. In his hand he held a phone. He had just finished an important call. This wasn't just a protector's job, it was a responsibility he felt compelled to take on. He wanted to make sure Christine and Adam had a chance to rebuild their lives. He called a women's shelter in Los Angeles that helped families like Christine and Adam, offering safe housing, legal counsel, and emotional support. The person on the other end of the line said, "We're ready to help. If you can bring them here, we'll make sure they're cared for." Relief washed over Shaq. But he knew just giving them a place to stay wasn't enough. He wanted Christine and Adam to have everything they needed: financial help, legal support, and emotional support, so they would never have to live in fear again. A few days later, with the police's help, Christine and Adam were transferred to the shelter. It was a warm, safe place with kind people and programs designed to help them rebuild their lives. When they arrived, Christine clutched Adam's hand tightly, her eyes filled with worry but also hope. Shaq was by their side not just as a protector, but as someone who cared deeply about their future. "This is just the beginning," Shaq said softly as he guided them inside. "But from here things will get better. I promise you." Christine looked up at Shaq, tears in her eyes. "You've already done so much. I don't know how to thank you enough." Shaq smiled gently, ruffling Adam's hair. "You don't need to thank me. This isn't about me. It's about you and Adam. You both deserve a better life." Still, Shaq knew that making sure Mike faced justice was crucial for their safety. With the shelter's legal team, Shaq covered the costs to make sure Mike was charged. The evidence from his backpack, along with Christine and Adam's testimonies, was strong enough to accuse Mike of many crimes: abuse, unlawful restraint, and attempted kidnapping. Shaq attended every court hearing not for attention, but to send a clear message: Christine and Adam were not alone. His calm, strong presence became a symbol of protection and justice in their eyes. When the trial ended, Mike was convicted and received a severe sentence. Christine and Adam could finally breathe a sigh of relief. With the shelter's help, Christine began taking classes to prepare for stable work. And Adam, though still young, slowly began to regain his innocent smile as he played in the safe, nurturing environment. Shaq never stopped checking in on them. He frequently visited, bringing new toys for Adam or helping Christine with lingering legal matters. One day, Shaq handed Adam a small basketball and said, "I think it's time you give this a shot. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll grow taller than me." Adam laughed, a joyful sound that rang out fully for the first time. "I'll try, but you're too tall." This experience opened Shaq's eyes to the many families like Christine and Adam who needed help. He began expanding his philanthropic efforts, focusing on supporting victims of domestic violence and creating safe environments for children. He used not only his fame but also his personal resources to make a real difference. As Christine and Adam slowly rebuilt their lives, Shaq felt a sense of peace. He knew he had done something meaningful, giving them a chance to start over. One afternoon, Shaq left the shelter. The sunlight glinted off the new toy car in Adam's hand, now a symbol of new beginnings. Outside, Shaq felt deeply satisfied, knowing the world had become a little better because of Adam's bravery and the belief that kindness could overcome the darkest circumstances. Time passed and the painful memories slowly faded, making room for brighter days. One sunny morning, the Los Angeles Police Department held a ceremony filled with balloons and ribbons. Laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air. But the real star of the day was 5-year-old Adam, who had bravely stood up to save his mom. Shaquille O'Neal stepped out of a sleek black SUV, his towering frame drawing everyone's attention. Today he wasn't just a guest, he was the main sponsor of the event. Quietly, he had funded the entire ceremony, not for fame or recognition, but to show that courage, no matter where it comes from, deserves to be celebrated. As Shaq entered the hall, his eyes immediately found Adam. The boy was dressed neatly, sitting beside Christine. Adam's bright eyes lit up when he saw Shaq, and his familiar toy car was still in his hand. Officer Ramirez, who had helped rescue Adam and his mom, took the stage. His voice echoed through the room. "Today we're not just honoring a 5-year-old boy. We're celebrating extraordinary courage." Adam didn't just speak up in a moment of danger. He created an opportunity to change his mom's life. That is something to be proud of. The room erupted in applause and Adam, though a little shy, beamed with a radiant smile. Beside him, Christine's eyes glistened with emotion. When it was time to present the award, Ramirez called Adam to the stage. The boy walked slowly, glancing toward Shaq for reassurance. Shaq smiled warmly and gave him a thumbs up, silently encouraging him. "You've got this, kid." Adam received a small medal with the words "Brave Little Hero" engraved on it. He held it tightly, his eyes shining with pride. Ramirez knelt down and placed a hand on Adam's shoulder. "Adam, you're not just your mom's hero. You're an inspiration to all of us. Thank you for your bravery." Adam nodded his thanks but then turned to Shaq, his eyes full of gratitude. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small, brightly colored drawing. It showed a tall man holding hands with a little boy, with the words "My hero" written at the top. For a moment, the room was silent as Adam walked over, holding out the drawing to Shaq. "Mr. Shaq, this is for you. You're my hero." Shaq, a man who was rarely moved to tears, felt his throat tighten. He knelt down, accepting the drawing with both hands, his gaze filled with warmth. "Thank you, Adam," he said, his deep voice laced with emotion. "But you're the real hero. You've shown courage greater than anything I've ever seen." Adam hugged Shaq, and Shaq gently placed a protective hand on the boy's back, holding him close. In that moment, everyone in the room felt the truth. Kindness and bravery have the power to change the world. As the ceremony neared its end, Shaq was invited to speak. Holding Adam's drawing in his hand, he stepped onto the stage with a broad smile. "This," he began, raising the drawing, "is why we're here today. Adam has shown us that courage doesn't depend on age or strength. Each of us can do the right thing no matter how hard it seems. Let kindness and bravery guide us just as Adam has." The whole room rose to their feet, applauding thunderously. It wasn't just for Shaq or Adam, but a recognition of the powerful impact their actions had on everyone's hearts. After the ceremony, Shaq and Adam stood outside in the bright sunshine. Adam played with his toy car, his smile unending. Christine approached, taking Shaq's hand. "You didn't just help us. You gave Adam faith in the world." "I don't know how to thank you." Shaq smiled softly and replied, "Christine, you and Adam overcame everything on your own. I just helped open a door. The rest was all you." The ceremony was over, but the story of Adam and Shaq didn't end there. It became a reminder that no matter how dark the world may seem, a spark of kindness and courage can light even the deepest shadows. As night fell, the city lights of Los Angeles sparkled like stars scattered across the ground. Shaq sat in his small office, Adam's drawing resting in front of him. The simple yet emotional strokes captivated him, making it impossible to look away. Once again he felt the immense power of courage embodied by a child, a force that inspired him to take greater action. Immediately after the ceremony, Shaq decided that Adam and Christine's story couldn't just end as an isolated event. He reached out to nonprofit organizations, women's shelters, and child advocacy centers to launch a nationwide campaign to raise awareness about domestic violence. The campaign was called Be the Voice, encouraging children and adults alike to bravely speak out against abuse or any injustice they witnessed. Shaq wasn't just a sponsor for the campaign, he became its face. Using his powerful voice and influence, he brought the message to millions. Short videos featuring him, sharing Adam's story, aired on TV and spread across social media. In these clips he emphasized, no one, especially a child, should live in fear. Speaking out isn't a sign of weakness. Speaking out is an act of courage. And when you dare to raise your voice, there will always be someone ready to stand with you. The Be the Voice campaign went beyond just raising awareness. It set up 24/7 hotlines for domestic violence victims and opened new shelters in various cities, offering safe places and free counseling services. Shaq frequently attended press conferences and workshops, sharing his experiences and stressing that anyone could make a difference. "I'm not a superhero," he said in one interview. "I'm just someone who saw something wrong and tried to fix it. But if everyone did that, the world would be so much better." A few months into the campaign, a large community event was held at Los Angeles' Central Park. It was a celebration of the brave individuals and organizations working to protect victims of domestic violence. Shaq, as always, was the guest of honor, but this time he wasn't alone. Christine and Adam walked alongside him, both glowing under the warm afternoon sun. Adam clutched a small basketball Shaq had given him, his face lighting up as he watched other kids playing on the nearby court. Christine, now healthier and more confident, carried herself with the poise of someone ready to rebuild her life. The event stage was decorated simply but meaningfully, adorned with images of interlocking hands, symbols of unity and hope. Shaq stepped onto the stage, not as just a legendary basketball star but as someone working for change. "Today we not only celebrate what we've achieved," Shaq said, his deep voice resonating through the crowd, "but we remind ourselves that the fight against domestic violence is far from over. Adam taught me that even the smallest voice can create a miracle. So I urge all of you, be the voice. Be the change. Never fear standing up for what's right." The audience erupted in applause. In the front row, Adam beamed with pride, his eyes sparkling with joy. Christine bowed her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, not tears of pain but of happiness. She knew that she and her son had been given a second chance. As the event came to an end, Shaq knelt down, took Adam's hand, and led him to the nearby basketball court. The boy giggled as Shaq dribbled the ball and showed off a few tricks, drawing cheers from the other kids. Christine watched from a distance, a content smile gracing her face. The Los Angeles sky turned a vibrant shade of orange as the sun set. The image of Shaq, Christine, and Adam playing basketball under the twilight became a symbol of unity, courage, and hope. Their story was no longer just about rescuing a family, it had grown into a powerful message. When we stand together, nothing is impossible. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.